Hello and welcome once again. We'll begin the news tonight with reports that President Muhammadu Buhari has sacked the management of the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company over the strike by the Nigerian Union of Electricity Employees that plunged the nation's capital into darkness. The strike by the electricity workers left many areas serviced by the Aedc in the Federal Capital Territory, Kogi, Nasarawa and Niger states without power for many hours on Monday. The workers were protesting unpaid allowances, salaries, and unremitted pension deductions. In a statement, the Ministry of Power confirms that the President approved a new interim governing board to oversee the day-to-day operations of the company. The Presidency has directed the Bureau of Public Enterprises to set up a new management team of the Aedc.
Well, to discuss this development, we're joined by Arise analyst Dr. Sam Amadi, who is also a former chairman and chief executive of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. Thank you so much, Dr. Sam Amadi, for joining us tonight. Well, I guess the fundamental question is, when this happened, questions arose as to whether the president is empowered by law to sack this board and what this really signals.
Well, clearly, this is a private electricity company regulated under the law. The president has Section 5 powers to supervise the federal agencies and also exercise authority over the economy. But that power only extends as much as the National Assembly has defined it. And by the Electricity Power Sector Reform Act, the National Assembly has defined it to give the NEC, the regulator, the right to regulate the sector. Again, issues around removal of management, just like even the financial sector, the central bank, for example, if there are grievous violation of service rules and orders, especially the market rules, by a regulated entity, the regulator, through due process investigations, can, through regulatory hearing, decide to disband, punish by expelling, sacking any delinquent chief executive, or even the entire board. So first, the president has no such power under the law because the president's power as chief executive is always circumscribed. Number two is that this is a private market. Although the Nigerian government is a minority shareholder, it is maneuvering around executive position with through board meetings and other corporate maneuvering, in which case they can instigate the removal of a non-performing or a delinquent in any way board. So if this was a case of board met and through the Bureau for Public Enterprises, the government engineered an ouster of that board or the management, then that's part of proper corporate politics.
It's almost
this is thoroughly unconstitutional, unlawful in the sense that this is a sense of executive order, executive discretion, in a matter where the president has no such executive discretion, because it's a private entity, even though an entity that Nigeria has equity participation, be it minority.
But from what has been going on, there's been an ongoing tussle between the Can Utility Company owners of Aedc, where shareholders had continued to differ on decisions and appointments of the board and management. So apparently there was chaos
already within the system.
Yeah, even when I was chairman and chief executive, at the beginning of after privatization, Can Utilities and Copperfield, I think, of Zambia, some of the investors had serious issues around pre-investment agreements, ownership and all that. First, if it's a corporate disagreement, it has to be resolved corporately. So if the regulator will be reluctant to step in, because these are things they can go to court. Now, what matters for regulator is the management. We have due process. That means if the management is competent and running the company according to regulatory practices, according to rules and regulations, the regulator may not care about the context around ownership. That's what the court deals with. Now, in terms of Aedc's operations, there's no collapse of operation arising from corporate tussle, management tussle.
Okay.
What we've seen is the strike, which maybe management is not doing well. They're not paying their salaries. So
those are the reasons given by.
I think why even government stepped in was that The emoluments weren't paid, the pensions deducted weren't paid.
The point I'm saying, that's the work of the regulator, because you see, the license conditions provide for how you can perform. And if a board has become so delinquent, so incompetent, or violative of rules that they cannot manage that entity well, and it's going to affect service delivery, the regulator should step in and ask them and create interim. But the government doing that as executive president creates political risk. Investors' confidence. By the way, it's just basically like government has stepped in and taken over back the asset, because you cannot, ask BPE to appoint interim management of a company owned by shareholders, even if they are.
But it has gone ahead to do that.
Yeah, that's wrong. I'm saying even if they are in confusion, that has to play out through a regulator. The example is central bank. I mean, if there's a corporate crisis of that dimension, the central bank steps in and take some preventive actions.
Okay, so what next now? Because, I mean, the president, just like we pointed out, has approved a new interim governing board. And the reason given is that of incompetence, and of course, do you think there are other issues of endemic governance failure,
like I said,
playing out?
Yeah.
And will it solve the problems, the issues that led to NUI going on strike in the first place? Unpaid salaries, unpaid allowances, salaries, and of course, unremitted pension.
This is unwittingly an indictment of the regulator.
That was what I was actually going to ask you.
Because
it looks like the regulator did not step in.
To the point that they cannot, either because of financial lack of bankruptcy or incompetence or crisis, they can't pay their workers and therefore affect service condition. It's a regulator's job to step in and resolve that problem by either altering the board and appointing an interim board. Now, what has happened here is that this will be interpreted as nationalization by another name. This will be interpreted as federal government is exercising overriding control of a corporate entity without going through, and not just corporate, regulated. See, the meaning of entity being regulated is that the government of Nigeria can no longer play directly. You have to conceal your hand through the regulator. The regulator is the bridge between government and private market. That's what the central bank can play. Nobody can question the central bank all over the world if it sacks a board member, a board of a private bank. We've seen one following their process, because they're going to be rule-based and market reviewed. But if federal government tomorrow says they have sacked the board of the central, of the first bank, because they're incompetent or they're not giving customers value,
is that the same case here? Because the BPE has been involved from the onset with all this goings on, and they have been giving the authority now by the government to establish an interim board. By the way, the board is interim.
BP has no such. BP is an investor. BP is a trustee of federal government's minority share in these entities. BP has no regulatory function. You see, they confuse things here. BP's job is that BP negotiates the transaction. And so just like you sold this thing, and the BPE holds that share for federal government. In a way, BP is actually on the board, represented, okay? So the person who is an umpire is the regulator, NARC, that should supervise, and based on government petition, for example, look, by the way, government has the right to care about the collapse of that sector. But they should do that through a regulated process, not executive or ministerial.
Because they even have share. I mean, they're part owners of the company. So if everything is collapsing, they should
have to
care.
Go to if you're a shareholder, your access is called or corporate politics. But regulator, you see, who protects the public interest in this sector is a regulator. Government as a shareholder has only option to do corporate politics or go to court. But regulator protects, and that's why government now deals with the regulator. So the branch can give instructions.
So are you saying in effect that what government has done now is null and void?
If they go to court, a good court will nullify that action, because it's against the EPSR Act, against the law. The prince should have done that.
Okay, let's talk about other fundamental questions about privatization in the first place. Recall that there have been calls even by the Senate to review the privatization process. Are we beginning to see symptoms of a process that may not have, gone on well?
Yeah, I think that's...
Is that the fundamental issue?
There are many things to review in the process, but the review, like I've always argued, should go down to the regulatory process. What that means is simple. Let's, for example, some of the actors are not competent, okay? We sold under some conditions. We've seen that they cannot perform. The regulator will set benchmark for the market and use that evaluation. By the way, how does central bank remove people's license? They go through a process. They have a criteria for service quality. They go and measure you. You didn't perform. The governor of central bank meets with the board and they vote that this bank should lose its license because it has not met a threshold of performance established by code. So the same way, we can take back this license, get people out of this market through a market-based approach, which means the regulator sets standard, evaluates them, monitor them, and so in Washington, they will say, oh, this is a regulated process. These guys failed the market condition. And through a transparent, not political intervention, these guys got off the market, and regulator got new people in. Nobody will consider that as a political risk. But if government sits and the president has approved, in fact, even if the president did it, you would have done it through the regulator. No point using the name of the president, because that sends shivers to the investment community. It simply means that government that's susceptible to politics can wake up and take actions. Now, this might be justified in public interest that, oh, these companies are basically remiss, doing nothing. They are in confusion.
Yeah,
but it could also happen for companies where strategic interest plays out big in the government and government takes action that's not in public interest.
Because what I have here is that the board of Aedc that is only authorized body that can appoint or remove its directors. But then from what is playing out, the board is lame. Their hands, they don't even have hands. Yes. They seem not to have a head.
So the person who has the right to step in is a regulator to say that this board has failed. Yeah. We can appoint an interim board awaiting resolution through a court process or other political process of that crisis.
So now that you had
that plays out, that's all the time we have.
No time. Okay, great.
Handle this particular one. Thank you so much, Dr. Sam Amadi, for your contribution on the program.